The USAFRICOM has been very, very successful since its inception. It has done a lot of great work building capacity of our African partners, and the African partners have changed over the years in a positive way. We have also supported the efforts of our ambassadors throughout the region and have advanced U.S. interests.
Part of your mission is to establish military relationships. How do they come into play when you're dealing with insurgent threats like what's in Somalia?
You can look at all the effectiveness that has been increased in the African partners. So the troop contributing countries in AMISOM, which we support the Department of State as they prepare those forces. They have had some significant success against al-Shabaab, and those troop contributing countries have performed well.
As I understand it, the idea was to help the African militaries establish themselves so that they could take care of crises on the African continent without our help.
Right, and it's about being a professional force in a democracy. Many of our African partners have increased their abilities as militaries, but also, and probably more importantly, to serve their governments and the people. That's changed significantly. We have, numerous examples of that.
So AFRICOM has helped to develop democracy on the continent?
Every time our militaries go out there, whether it be Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, or Coast Guardsmen, they bring a professionalism to them, they bring values, and that example has a major impact on our African partners, plus all the training that we do. So you could look at any of the situations from Ebola to the challenges in Boko Haram, and you can see people who have benefited from U.S. training and capacity building efforts working very effectively.
AFRICOM has garnered a lot of attention with its reaction to the Ebola crisis. How do emerging health issues impact your strategy?
The country of Liberia had that problem down there with the Ebola breakout. It basically shook them to their roots. Their confidence was gone. We went down in support of the U.S. aid to support that effort. We actually succeeded beyond most expectations, and not we, but really the Liberian leadership, Liberian people. And then, of course, a small but very, very professional armed force of Liberia, which has been built over the last 10, 15 years. And their motto since their inception has been building a force for good. So that Liberian Army was working with us side by side, showed a tremendous amount of confidence and competency, and helped to inspire the people, as well as provided a huge connection between the medical authorities who were working to support the people of Liberia.
So I assumed you learned a lot from the Ebola crisis. Give me an idea.
One of the biggest things that made a difference, quite frankly, was the Liberian leadership who reached out to the people and said, this is the best way to take care of yourself and your families. And that was one of the biggest things that was a takeaway, and that didn't take any money. That took leadership. But to get to that, they had to get some confidence and some ability to understand that they could, beat this disease back and save their people and help themselves. We, of course, provided communications and coordination efforts. So bringing all the people and all the players together and communicating with them, we were able to do that very effectively. We brought engineering expertise out to help them build. And the other thing that's huge is logistics. It's a country that has a underdeveloped infrastructure, and to get out to the places where the disease was ravaging the people was, a challenge. So that ability to move and ability to logistically support things helped out tremendously. And then we did this, as we always do, we trained people. We trained over 1,500 healthcare workers who are out there today, making a difference for Liberia and the people. We took the strengths of the military, and of course the biggest one was speed, was to be able to get there quickly and get out to the places that needed to help, or get the Liberian medical people, the international medical people out to where they needed to help the people. So there were a lot of good lessons from that. As always, when you do something like that, you have a learning curve, but the military is a pretty doggone good learning organization, so we learn fast.
For you personally, what has been the biggest learning curve?
To understand the people, to understand how they what their values are, and understand the situation is probably the biggest learning curve. It's huge, it's diverse, it's got over 1,000 languages, multi-ethnic backgrounds, and to understand those things is the biggest learning curve.
Other flashpoints we have on the continent are Boko Haram, ISIS. How is AFRICOM involved in fighting these violent insurgents?
In the Boko Haram piece, the three countries that are working outside of Nigeria to help contain the threat of Boko Haram, the forces that are doing the work in Cameroon are the Rapid Intervention Brigade, and we've had a long-standing relationship with them. The Cameroonian military that is taking the fight to Boko Haram is from the Special Anti-Terrorism Group, another long-term relationship we've had that they've built their capacity. The Nigerians, the colonel who's leading it went back to one of our war colleges for training, and he's leading the effort. So it's a combination of those things.
Are we doing enough?
That's a great question. You know, the trans-regional threats and the complex terrorist networks and the criminal networks, you know, that requires a whole host of things. And then, of course, you need a willing and able leadership in the country to make a difference. That's all a part of it. You know, the trans-regional criminal and terrorist network continues to grow. We've supported the Africans in successes in that in some areas, and other areas, you know, the Africans have not been as successful, such as Libya.
There are reports recently that seem to indicate that AFRICOM has become more willing to engage in combat operations.
All that is really, you know, based on the situations out there and what's needed. The way we work with all the African nations out there is it's really a demand-based operation. So what they need is what the things that we help them with, and that's what's most important for how we fit in and what we do in our role as a military.
So how does this reflect your recent posture statement to reduce risk for U.S. personnel and our facilities?
On the reducing risk in personnel and facilities throughout the African continent, as you know, because of the vast continent, you're really concerned about the distances. So what we have done in support of mainly the State Department, who has the primary responsibility to protect the embassies and the personnel abroad, we have developed cooperative security locations, which we can then move to based on indications of warning, so that we can get close enough and much closer than we've had in the past to be able to support them as the situation requires.
So are these staging areas like pre-position sites?
A cooperative security location is just a small location where we could come in. It's got a couple warehouses. We have contractors that are prepared to come and help us out, and then when the requirement is to get down to move closer to one of these trouble areas, then we move in, put up a bunch of tents, and prepare to support the embassy. So it would be what you would call a very austere location with a couple of warehouses that has things like tents, water, and things like that.
I'm curious, does the security for these installations fall under the contractors also?
Security for those are really done by the host nation. The security of the individual site itself, where they are, that's not a problem.
Well, that implies a lot of trust.
That's a great point because, you know, the places where we go and the teams that we work with, the people who secure us are our partners. We work with the African people, we work with the African militaries, and we support the efforts of the country teams who are really leading that effort. But it's important for us to understand, you know, what that level of poverty is and how the actions we take do have an impact on it. So, for example, in the Ebola effort, one of the biggest things we wanted to make sure we did is, as we went down and contracted a bunch of significant support, that we did it at the same level that the nation does it. When you're in a hurry, as you can imagine, we spend a lot of money to get things done fast, and when you go fast, sometimes you make mistakes. So I think we did a tremendous job from the very beginning in Liberia to make sure that what we were paying people was in accordance with their pay scales and was right for that level of population.
It's not something I would normally equate to a military command.
No, it's not. It's not something that we normally think about because, again, we're so task-oriented that, you know, we rush on. But those things are usually important because, again, we're part of a microcosm of what's happened in that nation at that time.
Is everything you do in Africa guided by the State Department?
Yes.
What defines good interagency partnerships with state and other government agencies?
The first and most important thing is that most of our efforts out on the continent are built and designed and worked in conjunction with the country team, who's a already built and well-coordinated interagency team. Probably the best place the interagency team cooperates because they live together, they work together in a place that they all want to see succeed. The other thing, of course, is our relationship with Maine State. So we have a great relationship with Maine State and USAID, and we continue to communicate with them, and we have multiple meetings throughout the year and gatherings where we work together with them to make sure that we're all one team as a broad interagency.
Are most of the ambassadors supportive of your efforts?
We're supportive of the ambassadors' efforts. So yeah, and as we are, because again, they're leading the efforts for the U.S. Policy throughout Africa. And we, of course, as you know, have a big interagency part of our staff here. So the deputy here is a former ambassador. Our outreach in the section in the J9 is also a former ambassador. And then we have a lot of foreign service officers integrated throughout the staff here to be part of that team.
How do you determine what U.S. military to use in your programs and initiatives and exercises?
The majority of the African nations, they have a heavy emphasis on ground troops. So that's why the Army and the Marines do quite a bit of work there. And then for their air forces, it's more an air force that does mobility and logistics. It's based on the demands that they need and where they want to do it. When you look at many of the African navies, they would probably be more akin to some of our Coast Guard. So it's really, like I said, it's a demand-based thing, and those ambassadors lead those efforts and coordinate with the militaries and how they want us to support them, and that's how we do it.
How do the African governments factor into these programs, initiatives, exercises, training events?
Well, the African governments, their primary desire is really to have a professional military that supports the governments.
Bang, 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 bang!
But each of our ambassadors who lead that government-to-government interaction and everything, you know, they talk to them and they, you know, work with them, because a lot of things we do here is about listening. So we just have to listen to what they want and what they need, because, like I said, they probably know a little bit better what they need than we do in most cases.
Sir, many of you and your team came to AFRICOM with the experiences of Iraq and Afghanistan. How do you apply those experiences to this job here?
Each time you go through experiences like that, you learn a lot.
Rear thrust!
The efforts that we're doing here to get the Africans to solve their problems and figure out how to enable that the best we can is the same thing we're trying to do in Afghanistan. Different time, a different place, but many of the principles are the same. And again, a professional military that serves its government and serves its people is what everybody in the world wants.
Building partner capacity is a key objective for AFRICOM on the continent. How do you use American military forces to accomplish it? Is it one-on-one, or is it platoon by platoon? Or?
It's all those things in both. You know, of course, a lot of it is the leader development piece that's usually important.
But that will come on that prevail, because
we do that by either sending people back to do training in the United States, which is a big part of it, but also we do a lot of training, whether you look at the exercises or whether you look at the programs that we have to build those militaries. And they're trained in everything from preventative health to the rule of law, how you integrate women into you know, their activities. You know, all those things are a part of what we train them in.
Are all the militaries receptive?
In most cases, like I said, first of all, it's demand driven, and second of all, yes, when we go down there, we bring a lot of things that they would like to become.
Green 1, cast 6, sit rep over.
Sometimes I tell the people the biggest thing you bring to the African militaries as you get in there are your values. They see how you operate, they see how you treat people, and they want to be like that.
There are some 53 countries within your area of operation, 5 regions. AFRICOM has, at the last count, relations with more than 40.
We have relations with all of them. They're different, different levels. Some of them are absolutely, you know, very, very effective in their capabilities, and they're very willing. Others, you know, based on history, still keep us at arm's length, you know, so we work through all those things.
So where do you get your manpower to maintain enduring connections?
We have state partnership programs that are hugely important. We've increased that in the last couple of years, so that's a long-term relationship building capacity that's very good. As you know, we have the people down at Djibouti that have long-term relationships, the Defense Attaché offices and the Office of Security Cooperation, where we in each of the country teams, and then we have a whole host of people not only here at AFRICOM but at all our component commands. They're out there all the time building relationships and building that trust and confidence. It's so important. The regional line force from the Army, the Marines come from a special purpose MAGTF, and then the Air Forces come from both Europe as well as back in the States as required to support the efforts.
Africa is huge. It's composed of different geographic regions, a variety of economic associations, there are military unions. It's very complex. What's your primary challenge?
The primary challenge, you know, at all those times is really just understand the complex situations that are out there and then how to best support them. You know, when you we're looking at Afghanistan, you're looking at one nation. Here we're looking at 53, and some of them have challenges just as tough. And then the other piece is just understanding the capabilities, the current capabilities of what they're working with. So.
But you're also factoring that with our own national security desires.
Yes, yes. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's really, again, a stable and prosperous Africa that, you know, is part of the international community and contributes to the international system. So the objectives are all kind of the same. Of course, you know, it's important to understand in Africa, you know, that, you know, 6 of the top 10, you know, growing economies are in Africa. In our interconnected world, there's connections between every country, you know, that go beyond what we've thought about in the past.
Sir, I'm curious, what about the impact of social media in Africa?
The social media is just like everywhere else, a hugely interesting phenomena. It has provided a huge situational awareness to people who have a phone. It has increased the demands from the people for their governments to be more accountable. There's some things, obviously, you can use it good or you can use it bad, but for the most part, you know, it has raised the level of awareness of populations about things happening in Africa and the world, and they have demanded more of their governments to take care of them better.
How does social media factor into your strategic objectives?
Part of the situational understanding is the role really of the government, the security forces, and the people. That interaction, if it's all working together as a team, things usually happen pretty good. It's you know, provides you the heartbeat of what the population's thinking about.
What's next, sir? What can we expect from Africa and from AFRICOM?
On the security home front, the challenges of the transnational both criminal and terrorist networks are the things that are really destabilizing the countries that are being challenged right now. So I think that we have to look at that broadly rather than individually in one country. So the problems that you have in Libya today are not just from internal to the country, but they have many external connections. So I think that we have to continue to look at a broader array of solutions, and I also think that we have to look long term, because you can imagine we get caught up in the short term all the time, and these are really, you know, long term efforts that you know, we hope that in 20 or 30 years we'll have a more stable and prosperous Africa.
But you read the headlines today, they all seem to indicate that Africa remains a dangerous place.
Well, there are places in Africa, but again, if you look at all 53 of them, if you look back 20 or 30 years, Africa was much less stable, was not, didn't have these booming economies, didn't have this educated class of people that could lead them into the future. In the most part, that's been moving in a positive direction.
So is AFRICOM making a difference?
Yes, yes, AFRICOM is definitely making a difference.